I didn't know at the time, but moving in with Noah would end up being one of the most confusing, beautiful, and completely unexpected chapters of my life. He was supposed to be a short-term solution. I had just gotten out of a messy breakup and needed a place fast. Noah had an extra room, a flexible lease, and, honestly, the kind of easygoing charm that made the idea of living with him feel safe. We'd known each other from college, not close, but enough to share laughs over cheap pizza and late-night group projects. He was straight. At least, that's what I always assumed. The kind of guy who played guitar at parties, flirted without realizing it, and made everyone feel like they were the center of the universe for at least a moment. I didn't read into it back then. But when we became roommates, I started seeing things I hadn't noticed before. Like the way he talked when no one else was around. Softer, more thoughtful. Or how he watched people, not just with interest, but with curiosity. Like he was studying the world and didn't always feel a part of it. It was subtle, but it was there. The apartment itself was nothing special. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Barely enough kitchen counter space to chop vegetables without bumping elbows. But it had character. Hardwood floors that creaked in just the right places. A balcony that faced the city skyline. And that soft hum of the AC unit that never fully shut off. Noah moved through the space like he belonged in every corner. He was a morning person. Made coffee strong enough to melt metal. Played the same playlist over and over until I knew every lyric, even the songs I hated. But he was also considerate in ways most guys weren't. He folded my laundry when I forgot it in the dryer, covered my plate when I left leftovers on the table, left sticky notes with dry sarcasm like, "You live here too? Consider cleaning like it's a shared planet." It was easy to fall into rhythm, which made what happened next so jarring. It was a Thursday night. We both had long days. Noah at his marketing job. Me stuck editing a disaster or project that my client just needed by tomorrow. He came home, dropped his bag, and cracked open 2 beers before I even had a chance to complain. We ended up on the couch, the TV on low volume, both half watching a documentary we weren't even following. And that's when it happened. One small thing. But everything changed. He stretched his arm behind me to grab the remote, and instead of pulling back right away, he left it there, not fully around me, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin just behind my shoulders. It didn't make sense. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't overt, but it lingered, just long enough for me to wonder if I was imagining it. I didn't move, and neither did he. We didn't talk about it. When the documentary ended, he yawned, mumbled something about needing a shower, and disappeared down the hall. I sat there for almost 20 minutes, trying to figure out what the hell that was. I told myself I was overthinking, that he was just tired, that I needed to stop reading into every little gesture like a closeted teenager. Except I wasn't a teenager anymore, and I wasn't imagining it, because the next night, it happened again. This time, we were on opposite ends of the couch. He was scrolling through his phone, and I was pretending to watch some mindless reality show. He looked up, eyes glassy from whatever rabbit hole he'd just fallen down. You ever feel like you're just not doing life right? I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, still looking at the screen, voice casual. Like everyone else got some manual on how to feel things. And you're just following instructions someone photocopied wrong. It wasn't the kind of thing people say out loud. At least, not the version of Noah I thought I knew. Sometimes, I said honestly. He nodded. "Yeah, same." Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Not romantic, not even flirty, just open, like a window that had been stuck shut for years had finally cracked. The awkward moment that started it all wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. It was a single sentence, a few nights later, spoken at 2:14 a.m. from the hallway outside the bathroom. I'd just gotten up for water. He'd just gotten out of the shower, towel around his waist, water dripping from his hair, skin flushed from heat. We literally bumped into each other. He laughed. I mumbled sorry. Then he looked at me, standing there half asleep, and said, "You don't have to pretend around me." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "I don't know. Just you can be you. He walked past me and into his room, closed the door. I stood there in the hallway, shirt clinging to my back, suddenly more awake than I'd ever been. And that's how it started, with small things, shared silences, lingering looks, a tension that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt like gravity pulling at the edges of every conversation. I didn't know where it was going, didn't know if I wanted it to go anywhere, but I knew, with terrifying certainty, that something was happening, something we couldn't unfeel. And I didn't know if it would wreck us or remake us. If you're enjoying stories like this and want to see more real-life LGBTQ plus emotional journeys, consider subscribing, liking, sharing, or leaving a comment below. Your support helps these powerful voices reach others who need them. Also, if you have a topic or story idea you want us to explore, drop in the comments or post it in the community tab. It had been 4 days since Noah stood in the hallway, towel-wrapped, vulnerable, and said the words I still hadn't stopped replaying. You don't have to pretend around me. They weren't dramatic. He didn't lean in after and kiss me or follow it with a confession of secret feelings. But something in his eyes, in his tone, it was like he knew. Or maybe like he wanted me to know that he knew. The next morning, I woke up to find breakfast already made. 2 mugs of coffee, eggs slightly burned, toast a little uneven, but still effort. Noah wasn't in the kitchen. Just a sticky note on the fridge that said, "Didn't mean to make things weird. Thought breakfast might reset the universe." And I smiled. It was such a Noah move, to brush off a deeply personal, emotionally charged moment with charm and scrambled eggs. But I appreciated it, because truthfully, things had gotten weird. Not in a bad way, just in a what the hell is this way. That weekend, our friends came over. Just a few people. Old college crew. Beers, music, cards, the usual. Noah was in his element. Storytelling, loud laughter, hand gestures so big he knocked over a drink mid-conversation. Classic Noah. But I watched him differently that night. I noticed the way his eyes flicked toward me between jokes. The way he made sure I was included in every conversation. The way his knees sometimes bumped mine under the table and didn't move away. If anyone else noticed, they didn't say a word. But I did, because the tension, that quiet, slow-building charge, was back, stronger. Later that night, after everyone had left and the apartment was still foggy with leftover laughter and secondhand buzz, Noah and I ended up on the balcony. He passed me a beer and leaned back in the old patio, chair we always said we'd replace, but never did. "I think Sam's suspect something," he said. I blinked. "What?" He chuckled. "She gave me a look tonight. You know, that, I know what you're not saying. Look, she does." I sipped my drink. "And what does she think you're not saying?" He shrugged. "That I might be catching feelings for my roommate." The words hung in the air like smoke. Noah didn't look at me, just took a long sip of his beer, pretending like he hadn't just detonated a truth bomb between us. I didn't respond right away. What could I say? That I'd been thinking about the shape of his mouth when he was focused? That I noticed how he hummed while folding laundry? That I'd started planning my days around whether I could catch him in the kitchen at the same time? Finally, I said, "And are you?" He turned, met my eyes. "I don't know," he said, "but I don't hate the idea." I didn't sleep much that night. And the next morning, I pretended like nothing had happened. Not because I wanted to ignore it, but because I didn't know how to live in the new version of us we were tiptoeing into. Every word felt heavier, every gesture more loaded. He handed me a coffee and our fingers brushed, and it felt like more. He sat beside me on the couch, and the space between us felt like a dare. We were both pretending, but not in the way I used to. Now, we were pretending we weren't pretending. One night, we both got home late. He from work, me from a friend's gig. We ended up eating takeout on the floor, using a moving box as a table even though we'd lived there for months. I was halfway through a dumpling when he said, "I had a dream about you last night." My heart stuttered. Yeah. We were in the apartment, but it wasn't our apartment. And you were showing me how to cook, which is hilarious because I can barely make toast. I smirked. Accurate. But it felt normal, he said, like we'd been doing it forever. Like I couldn't remember a time when we weren't like that. He didn't say together, but he didn't have to. I swallowed hard. What do you think that means? He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't try to dodge it. I think I'm more into you than I realized. It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me in a whisper over soy sauce packets and greasy chopsticks. And I didn't know how to respond. So I just nodded. Not yes, not no, just a silent, I'm not running from this. And Noah, sweet, unpredictable, infuriating Noah, didn't push. He just smiled and kept eating. But things didn't stay soft and cinematic forever, because the more we leaned into whatever this was, the more real it became. And real things, they're messy. They require answers, labels, clarity, and eventually risk. The next time things truly shifted was at a party, his coworker's birthday. I wasn't going to go, but he insisted, said I'd be bored alone, that I never got out enough, that I owe it to the social gods to show up for once. So I did, and at first it was fine. Loud, crowded, a little too many white wine spritzers and people saying, "Oh my God, it's been forever," when they'd seen each other last week. Then a girl leaned in close to Noah, blonde, flirty, clearly interested, and he didn't exactly back away. He didn't flirt either, but he didn't stop it. And I stood across the room, drink in hand, smile frozen, reminding myself, he's not yours, not officially, not publicly, not in a way that gave me the right to be mad. But that didn't stop it from hurting. Later, in the Uber home, we didn't talk much. He scrolled through his phone. I stared out the window. When we got in, I went straight to my room. He followed, leaned against the doorframe. "You okay?" I shrugged. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't buy it, but he didn't press either. Just said, "You know that didn't mean anything, right?" I didn't turn around. I know, but I didn't feel like I knew. Because sometimes silence is more confusing than rejection. And we were running out of places to hide from what this was. We didn't talk much the next day. Not because of a fight, we hadn't had one, but something between us had shifted in the silence of that Uber ride home. The unspoken tension had stopped being playful. Now it had an edge to it, an ache. Noah spent most of the morning in his room with the door half closed, strumming his guitar absently. I could hear fragment of chords drifting down the hall, familiar, repetitive, unsure. I busied myself with laundry, dishes, rearranging the junk drawer, anything that didn't require me to look him in the eye. By noon, I'd run out of things to avoid. I passed his door on the way to the kitchen and paused. He looked up at the sound of my footsteps. "Hey," he said. His voice was calm, like nothing was wrong. But his eyes, they weren't pretending anymore. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You want coffee?" "Sure." So we drank coffee. Together. Quietly. The way people do when they're both afraid of starting the conversation that might break them. Later that afternoon, he finally spoke. We were sitting on the floor of the balcony again, knees touching, backs against the wall. "I don't know how to do this," he said softly. I didn't ask what. I knew. "I keep thinking," he continued. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it weird? What if I push too hard or not enough?" "You haven't pushed," I said. "Then maybe that's a problem." I looked at him. He was staring out at the skyline, jaw clenched, hands fidgeting with a bottle cap. "Noah." He turned. "I like you," he said. No build-up, no hesitating. I don't know what that means or what it's supposed to mean or how far I want to take that sentence. But it's true, and I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel it. I didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at him, at this man who had always been just out of reach, who had offered me friendship like a shield and slowly lowered it piece by piece. I reached for his hand, and he didn't flinch. We didn't kiss. Not that night. But something cracked open between us, wide and irreversible. We stopped hiding the way we looked at each other in the kitchen. We didn't brush off late-night talks or laugh off lingering touches. But we also didn't define it. Not yet. We weren't rushing. We were scared. And somehow, still we were closer than ever. Then came the night. Everything nearly fell apart. It started with the most ordinary thing. A question. He was sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal at 10 p.m., legs propped on the chair across from him. I was scrolling through a movie list on my laptop, and he said, "Have you told anyone?" I paused. Told anyone what? You know about us. I blinked. What is us? He set the spoon down. Come on, don't do that. I'm not trying to start something. I said, suddenly defensive. But if you want to talk definitions, maybe we should figure out first. Noah leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So we're just roommates again now. I didn't say that. But you did not say it. The room filled with tension, sharp and electric. Do you want to tell people? I asked carefully. He hesitated. Then I don't know. I looked down. Then maybe we're not ready. Noah stood up and took his bowl to the sink. He didn't slam it, didn't yell, but the silence that followed was worse than any fight. It was a silence of two people who didn't know how to hold each other without breaking everything else in the process. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his words over and over. Have you told anyone? The truth was I hadn't. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know what I would be telling them. That the guy I used to know as a straight friend was now falling asleep in a room across the hall with a version of me stuck in his head. That we were figuring it out one hesitant glance at a time. That maybe, just maybe, this was something real. It felt too fragile to name. And maybe I didn't want to risk breaking it by making it official. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. Just a note on the counter. Went for a run. Needed to clear my head. Don't read too much into it. N. But I did read into it. Because how could I not? He came home around noon, sweaty and quiet. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to work. We didn't talk. He showered, changed, grabbed a protein bar. Then, as he walked past me to his room, he paused. I'm not mad at you, he said. I know. I just thought maybe we were on the same page. I closed my laptop. We are. Then why does it feel like we're reading two different books? I stood up, heart pounding. Because I'm scared, I said. Because you're not a phase to me. And if we do this, if we really do this, I can't be the only one willing to stand in the light. Noah stared at me, and for a moment, I thought I'd gone too far. Then he said, Okay, he repeated. Let's do this. For real. He didn't kiss me. Not then. Not yet. But he reached for my hand again. And this time, I didn't flinch. For the next few days, everything felt lighter. Not in the we're suddenly perfect kind of way, but in the way that happens after you stop pretending and finally said what's been building for weeks. We didn't define it with labels. We didn't update our relationship status or start introducing each other differently. But something between us had shifted. And now, every touch lingered a second longer. Every conversation felt like it mattered just a little more. Every laugh meant something. We were still roommates. But also not just that anymore. It was subtle. He'd stand a little closer when we cooked. Sometimes he'd reach over and fix the collar of my shirt or squeeze my shoulder when passing behind me on the couch. Small things. Things I could have explained away to anyone else. But I didn't want to because I knew exactly what they were. They were his way of saying, I'm here. I feel this too. And that was enough for now. One Friday evening, I came home to the smell of something burning. I rushed into the kitchen, already prepared to find disaster. And there he was, Noah, shirtless in gym shorts, holding a smoking pan like it had personally betrayed him. Oh, good, he said, fan in the air. You're here, just in time to witness my descent into domestic failure. I laughed. What was that supposed to be? Pasta, he muttered. I think, possibly an ancient curse. I took the pan from him, dumped it in the sink, and turned on the fan. You know, I said, for someone who talks like Gordon Ramsay when I burn toast, your skills are questionable. I was distracted. By what? The recipe? He didn't answer right away. Just walked over, leaned against the counter, and looked at me. You, he said simply. And just like that, my heart forgot how to beat in rhythm. We ordered takeout, ate on the floor as usual, watched an old comedy that neither of us really paid attention to. He leaned against me halfway through, head on my shoulder, and didn't move. I didn't either. I didn't want the moment to end. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't thinking about how to protect myself from what I felt. I was just feeling it, fully. But real life didn't disappear just because we'd found something good. Monday hit hard. He went back to work. I had a meeting-heavy day, full of deadlines and distractions. We barely crossed paths, and the space between us, after days of warmth and closeness, felt loud. It wasn't anyone's fault, just life. But by the time Thursday rolled around, I was missing him in a way that surprised me. Not the just friends kind of missing. The kind where you want to be around someone even if you're both doing nothing at all. So I sent him a text. "You home tonight?" He replied a few minutes later. "Yeah. You okay?" "Yeah. Just miss our terrible dinners and terribler movies. Be there by 7. I'll bring both." That night, he came home with Thai food and a rented movie on his laptop. We ate, watched, laughed too hard at a scene that wasn't that funny. And halfway through, he paused the movie and turned to me. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous." I teased. He smiled but didn't laugh. "I want to tell someone." I sat up a little. "About us?" He nodded. "Sam, maybe? Or Josh? I don't know. Are you ready for that?" "I think I'm getting there," he said. "I just don't want to keep this in a box anymore." I looked at him, really looked, at the guy who once couldn't even finish a sentence about his own feelings, at the same guy who now wanted to take a step out of the shadows. For me, it meant more than I could say. "You don't have to rush it," I said gently. "I'm not. I just don't want you to think I'm hiding you." My throat tightened. "I don't," I whispered, "but I get it." He nodded. "Okay." Then he smiled. Soft. Real. Still scared, though. "So am I said, "but we're in it together." And that was the truth. The next weekend, we had people over again. A small group. Mutual friends. Sam came. Josh, too. Everyone brought drinks and stories. It felt just like old times. Except now, there was something new between us. Quiet. Not obvious. But present. And then it happened. We were in the kitchen. I was cutting lime wedges for the drinks, and Noah was standing beside me, talking to Sam. She laughed at something he said and reached out to nudge his arm. Then she looked at me, and something passed over her expression, sharp, perceptive. Later that night, when the others were gone and the apartment was quiet again, I found her note tucked behind a kitchen magnet. "Tell him, or I will. Sam." I showed it to Noah. He just laughed, shaking his head. "She always knows." "Yeah," I said. "She does." He looked at me, then leaned in, and finally, after weeks of dancing around it, after shared looks and almost confessions, he kissed me. It wasn't dramatic. No music. No fireworks. Just lips pressing mine, soft and real and steady. And everything in me went still, the kind of still that only comes when something finally makes sense. When we pulled back, he looked nervous. "Was that okay?" I laughed, breathless. "Ask me again and I'll kiss you this time." He grinned. "Promise?" I didn't answer. I just kissed him again. And this time, neither of us held back. Kissing Noah didn't lead to fireworks or decorations. There was no dramatic music play in the background. No sweeping gesture that made it all feel cinematic. But the quiet moment that followed, that was real. It was two people sitting with the weight of what had just happened, not scrambling to explain it or take it back, just letting it settle, letting it exist. The next morning, we woke up in our usual rhythm. He poured coffee before I made out of my room, and I snagged the last clean mug without saying a word. But when I handed him a spoon to stir in his ridiculous amount of sugar, our hands touched. And this time he didn't pull away. I didn't either. He just smiled at me over the rim of his mug, one of those private, low-lidded, you know what this means kind of smiles. I wasn't used to that, to being looked at like that, but I liked it. Still, we didn't talk much about the kiss itself. Maybe we were afraid of rushing whatever this was. Maybe we were both so used to things breaking the minute we tried to define them that we thought, let's just be in it for now. But the energy between us had changed. It was softer, warmer, more open, like we had both stopped holding our breath at the same time. That night, we found ourselves on the couch again. No movie, no food, just music humming low from the speaker and the city outside our window breathing its usual restless rhythm. Noah was flipping through a book he never finished, one leg curled under him, his foot brushing against mine occasionally, like he'd forgotten where he ended and I began. You ever think about what people would say? He asked suddenly. I looked up from my phone. About us? He nodded. All the time, I admitted. He shut the book, but didn't put it down. Do you care? I wish I could say no. He nodded slowly. Same. We were both quiet for a while. And then he said, I told Sam. I blinked. You did. He nodded again, still watching the cover of the book like it held all the answers. What did she say? She said, took you long enough. I laughed, and so did he, but it faded quickly. She was cool about it, he added. Said she'd always suspected, that she was just waiting for me to stop playing dumb. Classic Sam. I said, smiling. He leaned his head back against the couch, eyes closed now. I don't think I'm ready to tell my family, he admitted. You don't have to, I said. Not until you are. Noah opened his eyes. Would that bother you? Honestly, I hesitated. No, not if it means you're still showing up for this. He nodded, swallowing hard. I am. The next weekend, his co-workers threw a party, some rooftop mixer thing for a guy's birthday. Noah asked me to come. I said yes. I didn't think too hard about it until we actually got there. It was crowded, loud, filled with people who knew Noah but didn't know me, and definitely didn't know us. I watched him slide effortlessly into conversations. He had this way of making everyone feel like they were the funniest person in the room. Part charm, part attention, part Noah. But I wasn't part of the circle. Not really. I lingered by the food table, sipping a drink I didn't like, watching him from across the rooftop. And then it happened. One of the women, tall, brunette, clearly into him, leaned in a little too close, her hand grazing his arm. He laughed, politely, but he didn't move away, didn't shut it down. And I suddenly felt like I was outside looking in, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because I hadn't realized how invisible I still felt when it came to his world. Later, when the party had thinned out and the music faded to background noise, we sat in the back of the Uber in silence. Noah was scrolling his phone. I was staring out the window. I could feel the words stacking up in my throat, begging to be said, but I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't pick a fight over something I couldn't name. We didn't talk about it when we got home either. He went straight to the shower. I went to the kitchen and stood there with a glass of water I didn't drink. When he finally came out, towels slung over his shoulders, hair damp, eyes tired, he stopped in the hallway. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. Really? I turned toward him. You didn't exactly jump to shut that girl down tonight. He blinked, surprised. She was just talking. She was flirting. So, I repeated, trying not to raise my voice. So I stood across the rooftop, watching her run her fingers down your arm while you laughed like it was nothing. He looked frustrated now. You think I was into that? I don't know what to think, Noah. Silence, then softer. Do you think I don't want this? That I'm still playing some game. I shook my head. No, I didn't know where I stood tonight. His face softened, and slowly he stepped toward me. You stand right here, he said, next to me, even if I'm still figuring out how to show it. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, then nodded, and he reached for me, not to kiss me, not to make it disappear, but just to hold. We stood in the kitchen like that for a long time. Two flawed people figuring it out, holding each other, because sometimes that's the only language that makes sense. The next day, he sent me a message, a single text while I was out grabbing groceries. Still learning. But I see you. I promise I do. I smiled at my screen for what felt like too long. Then typed back, I see you too. And this time, it felt like enough. It's strange how quickly something can become familiar. A week ago, the idea of kissing Noah felt like a fantasy I wasn't sure I was even allowed to imagine. Now, I caught myself looking for him in rooms before realizing he was already right beside me. The shift wasn't loud. We hadn't announced anything. But everything between us had changed. We still moved like roommates, passing each other in the hallway, sharing the grocery bill, bickering about who forgot to buy toilet paper. But layered under all that was something new. When I handed him his keys, our fingers always touched. When we sat on the couch, we leaned in. When he said my name, it sounded different, like he knew it mattered. One night, we stayed up late, too late, watching terrible reality shows and making jokes. So dumb we were crying laughing by 2 a.m. I was sprawled on the floor, head resting near his leg, my stomach hurting from the laughter, and somewhere between breathless giggles. He looked down at me and said, "Promise me something?" I wiped a tear from my eye. "What?" "No matter how complicated this gets, don't shut me out." I looked up at him, surprised by the seriousness behind his words. "I won't." "I mean it," he said. "People get scared. They run. I don't want that." "You think I'm going to run?" "No," he said quietly. "But I've seen it happen. And I just don't want to lose this before I've even fully figured out what it is." His voice was soft, uncharacteristically vulnerable. So I sat up, scooted closer, and said, "I'm not going anywhere." And for once, I saw him believe it. That weekend, Josh, one of our mutual friends, hosted a get-together. Not a party. Just pizza, drinks, people we'd known since college. The kind of event where everyone knows your business before you say a word. Noah asked me, "Should we go together?" "We always do," I said with a half-smile. "You know what I mean." I nodded. "I do." He hesitated. "Are you okay with that?" "Are you?" His smile was nervous. "I think I want to stop hiding." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because I realized he wasn't just talking about us. He was talking about himself. The night of the gathering, we took separate Ubers, unplanned, just bad timing. I arrived first. The room was already buzzing. Familiar faces, inside jokes. Someone passed me a beer before I even made it to the couch. A few people asked if Noah was coming. "He'll be here," I said, and when he walked in 20 minutes later, something was different. Not in how he looked, but in how he walked in, like he wasn't carrying a secret anymore. He joined our circle, slid onto the couch beside me, and gave me a look, one of those subtle private glances that said, "I've got you." Josh started teasing us within 10 minutes. "So, you two spending a lot of time together lately, huh?" Noah didn't deflect, didn't joke. He just said, "Yeah." Simple, calm, and the room shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough for people to glance, register, and move on. And somehow, that was better than any dramatic reveal could have been. Later, in the kitchen while grabbing drinks, Sam cornered me. "So, you guys?" I smiled. "Yeah, we're figuring it out." She raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" I nodded. "Actually, I really am." She smiled, stepped forward, and hugged me. "Good," she said. "You deserve to be seen." And for the first time, I let that sink in. Back at the apartment that night, Noah kicked off his shoes and dropped onto the couch with a tired sigh. Think I pulled a muscle in my soul from all that emotional bravery. I laughed. "You handled it like a pro." He turned to me, eyes serious now. "Really?" "Yeah," I said. "You didn't try to hide me." He reached out, took my hand without thinking. I didn't want to. We sat there a while, not talking much, just holding hands, legs tangled, breathing in sync. And I realized then this was what it felt like to be chosen, not in a loud way, but in a steady, everyday kind of way, the kind that doesn't need constant words to prove itself. Things weren't perfect. The world outside our apartment hadn't changed. There were still questions we hadn't answered, conversations we hadn't had, But inside our home, something was beginning to bloom, steady and slow and rooted, and we were growing with it. Somewhere between making space for each other and sharing pieces of our lives, we stopped keeping score. Who texted first? Who did the dishes last? Who leaned in more during a hug or lingered longer after a laugh? It all started to blur in the best way, not because we lost ourselves, but because we were finally building something that didn't require balance sheets to feel real. Still, the outside world wasn't always as soft, especially when we started showing up together. Not together, like holding hands on a red carpet. More like him brushing a strand of my hair away without thinking, or me adjusting the strap of his bag as we waited for coffee. Tiny things. Things that didn't seem like much, until you saw people's eyes catch it. There was one time in particular. We'd gone to a new cafe near our apartment. It had mismatched chairs and indie music and chalkboard menus. Basically screamed queer-friendly, but still sat on the edge of a neighborhood where that wasn't always guaranteed. We sat at the window, shared a blueberry muffin we didn't admit we were sharing, talked about weekend plans and whether we had the budget to finally get a better couch. I just leaned in to wipe a crumb from Noah's lower lip when it happened. A guy, probably our age, button-down shirt, clean cut, walking past outside slowed, looked, then looked again, and shook his head. It wasn't violent, wasn't even overtly aggressive, but it was the kind of look that curled in your stomach and made you feel smaller than you had a minute ago. I felt it, so did Noah. He looked down at the table, clearing his throat. I reached for his hand, softly. He let me take it, but didn't look up. Back at the apartment, I brought it up. "You okay?" He was changing shirts, his back to me. "Yeah," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Noah," he sighed, pulling the shirt over his head. "I hate that it still gets to me." It got to me, too. "I know, but it's different for you." That made me blink. Different how? He turned around, finally facing me. "You've known who you are longer. You've had time to build armor. I'm still trying to remember how to breathe in rooms like that." I stepped toward him. "I don't need you to have armor. I need you to let me stand next to you when you don't." His face softened. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Okay." And when he hugged me that time, it wasn't just affection, it was trust. A few days later, he asked if I wanted to visit his brother's place that weekend. It was a casual invite, game night, his brother's wife, a few friends. But I knew it meant more than it sounded. I raised an eyebrow. Will they know about us? They've guessed. I think they've just been waiting for me to say it. And now, he shrugged, now I want to. That sentence echoed in my head for hours afterward, because a few weeks ago, he couldn't even say it to himself. Saturday rolled around faster than I expected. We picked up wine on the way and joked about how his brother always tried to outhost everyone. But when we pulled up in front of the house, Noah went quiet. "You nervous?" I asked. "A little. We can turn back." He looked at me, serious now. "I don't want to." So we walked in, together. His brother, Mark, greeted us with a grin and a half-tackle hug. Mark's wife, Layla, pulled me into a welcome like I'd been there a dozen times. The house smelled like garlic bread and some kind of slow-cooked magic. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. We were in the kitchen. I was pouring drinks. Noah was beside me, laughing at something Layla said. Then Mark turned to us, setting down a tray. "So," he said casually, "you guys a thing now, or just roommates who share muffin halves in public?" The room went quiet for half a beat. Noah looked at me, then back at his brother. "Yeah," he said, "we're a thing." And that was it. Mark grinned. "Took you long enough." Layla raised her glass, to figuring it out. We laughed, clinked glasses, and for a moment it felt easy again. Later that night, after too many board games and Layla's overly competitive streak in charades, we stepped out onto the porch. It was quiet, just the two of us. Stars above, warm light spilling out from the kitchen behind us. Noah leaned against the railing, sipping his drink. "I thought that'd be harder," he said. "You handled it like a pro." I was sweating through my shirt the entire time. I notice. He laughed, and then got quiet. Do you ever think about what this is now? What do you mean? Like, what we are, where this goes? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think about it. And I stepped beside him, close enough to feel his shoulder. I think I want to keep finding out. With you. He looked at me, eyes soft, guard down. Same. We didn't label it that night. Didn't say boyfriend or partner or anything that could box it in too tight. But when he kissed me under those porch lights, slow, steady, like he had nowhere else to be, I realized something. Whatever we were becoming, we weren't afraid of it anymore. By the time fall rolled in, everything between us felt warmer, even the silences. I'd wake up to the smell of coffee some mornings, and without asking, there'd be 2 mugs on the table. His playlist started including songs I liked, even ones he once teased me for. And sometimes I'd come home from work to find him lying across my bed, reading my books like they were his. He never asked, but I never stop him, because that's what we were now. 2 lives slowly melting into each other without asking permission. We didn't announce anything online, didn't change statuses or post a photo with a sappy caption. But our friends knew, our neighbors knew. Even a guy at the bodega started slipping in things like, "You two always together?" followed by a wink that said more than words. And honestly, that felt enough. For now. But life has a way of testing comfort, right when it starts to feel permanent. It happened on a Wednesday. Rainy, uneventful. I came home early, a canceled shift, and walked in on Noah standing in the middle of the living room, phone in hand, shoulders tense. He didn't hear me at first. Didn't even look up. His face was pale, his eyes glassy. And that's when I knew something was wrong. I stepped closer. "Noah." He looked up sharply, then back down at his phone. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Didn't hear you come in." "What happened?" He swallowed hard. "My mom called." I waited. She asked if I was seeing anyone. And I didn't lie, he said. But I didn't tell the truth either. My chest tightened. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. She asked if it was a girl from work. I laughed it off, said I was keeping it casual. He sat down, head in his hands. I hate that I did that. I sat beside him. "It's okay." "No, it's not. I feel like I erased you." "You didn't," I said quietly. "You just weren't ready to explain everything in one phone call." He didn't look convinced. "I don't want to be someone who hides," he said. "Not anymore." "You're not hiding," I said. "You're surviving." He looked at me finally. "Do you ever get tired of making excuses for me?" That hit deeper than I expected. But I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I just don't want you to hate yourself for moving at your own pace." He leaned into me then, not romantically, just needing something to hold on to, and I gave it freely. That weekend, we barely left the apartment. We cooked, cleaned, watched reruns of old shows we both knew by heart. And in between those little moments, he was quieter than usual. But I let him be, because sometimes loving someone means giving them space to untangle their own knots. Sunday night, he turned to me on the couch and said, "Can I ask you something kind of stupid?" "Always." "If I asked you to come home with me for Thanksgiving, would you?" I blinked. That I hadn't expected. "You mean to your parents?" He nodded. "Yeah. I mean, I know they don't know. Not really. But I think maybe I want to change that." I studied his face. He was nervous, hesitant, but also determined. "You sure?" I asked. "No," he said honestly. "But I think I want to be." We didn't plan it overnight, but the idea hung in the air after that. And for the first time since we kissed, I could see where this was going. Something real, something brave, something that could live outside our 4 walls. It was terrifying and beautiful. The next morning, he woke me up with breakfast in bed, burnt toast, slightly undercooked eggs, and coffee that was somehow colder than usual. But he was smiling like he'd won a medal. "What's all this?" I asked, sitting up. "My apology," he said. "For what?" "For being scared. For fumbling through this. for making you shoulder more than your half sometimes. I blinked at him, taken off guard. Noah, he sat on the edge of the bed, holding his own mug. You didn't sign up for the closet, he said, and I'm not going to make you live there just because I did. I reached out, took his hand. I signed up for you, not for perfection. He exhaled shakily, and I could see the guilt melt off him piece by piece. Later that week, something shifted between us again, subtle but steady. He stopped pulling his hand back when we crossed the street. He kissed me in the corner booth of our favorite diner when he thought no one was watching, but this time, he didn't flinch when someone was. And when we lay in bed that night, tangled in sheets and silence, he whispered, I think I'm starting to feel like myself, with you. And I smiled into his shoulder, because I knew what he meant. The closer we got to Thanksgiving, the more I could feel the weight of it on Noah's shoulders. He didn't say it out loud, but it lived in the quiet ways he stared at his phone longer than usual, or how his jaw tightened when his family's group chat lit up. He was afraid, not of them, but of what they might take from him the second he stopped pretending. I didn't push, but I stayed close. Even when he didn't say anything, I sat with him, let my knee touch his under the table, let my presence answer the questions he wasn't ready to ask himself out loud. But the tension was there, and eventually it found a crack to slip through. It started small, a Tuesday night, both of us tired, ordering takeout after work. He'd been distant all day, quiet, unreachable in that way people get when they're fighting something invisible. You okay? I asked, nudging a carton of lo mein toward him. He shrugged. Just tired. You've been tired a lot lately. What's that supposed to mean? He asked, sharper than I expected. I paused. Nothing. Just, I notice things. Yeah. Well, maybe you don't have to notice everything, he muttered. That stung. But I let it sit for a second. Noah, I said carefully, if this is getting too real, too fast, it's okay to say it. His eyes snapped up. Is that what you think? I don't think anything. I'm just trying to understand why it feels like you're pulling away. I'm not, he said quickly. Then what is it? Because I'm doing my best here, and it's starting to feel like I'm the only one who is. Silence. Heavy. Then he said, you don't know what it's like. I blinked. What? You don't know what it's like to have a whole version of yourself that you've kept hidden for years, and then try to unravel it in front of someone else. You didn't grow up in a house where love had conditions, where silence was safer than truth. I opened my mouth, then shut it, because he was right. I hadn't. He stood up, walked toward the window, hands on his hips. Then, softer. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm scared, and it's easier to be scared alone. I got up and walked over to him, took a second, then placed a hand on his back. You don't have to do any of this alone, I said quietly, but you do have to let me in. He turned to me slowly, eyes red. You still want to come with me? To your parents? He nodded. I never did want to. The next morning, we didn't say much, but he reached for my hand when we were brushing our teeth, fingers threading through mine without a word. And that was his way of saying, I heard you. The night before Thanksgiving, we packed an overnight bag. It was a 3-hour drive, mostly quiet. Noah let me pick the music, and I chose old road trip songs we could hum to without really thinking. At one point, he glanced at me and said, what if they hate me for this? I looked at him. All you've done is love someone. If they can't see that, it says more about them than you. He nodded slowly, didn't respond, but he didn't ask again. We arrived just before dark. His parents' house was smaller than I expected. Brick, warm lights in the windows, a yard filled with wind-blown leaves. His mom opened the door. She hugged him first, long and tight, like she hadn't seen him in years. Then she turned to me. You must be... Her sentence stopped there, like she hadn't rehearsed what came next. I smiled gently. Hi, I'm just happy to be here. She blinked, then smiled back. Come in. It's freezing out. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, not turkey. Mashed potatoes. Pie cooling on the windowsill, like something out of a novel. No one brought it up. Us, Not directly, but his mom watched us closely. The way Noah looked at me, the way I refilled his glass without asking. After dessert, when Noah stepped away to grab something from the car, she sat beside me. Is he happy? She asked. I turned to her, surprised. Yes, I said. I think he's finally learning how to be. She nodded. Long pause. Then, he was always a little different growing up. Quieter, more sensitive. I didn't respond. Just let her speak. I used to worry about what that meant. What kind of life he'd have. I guess I'm still worrying. Can I be honest? I asked. She looked at me. Loving him has been the most natural thing I've ever done. And the hardest. Because he doesn't always believe he deserves it. Her eyes welled up. She looked down at her hands. I don't know what I expected, she whispered. But it wasn't this. Is that okay? She looked up again, held my gaze, and after a long pause, she said, I think so. That night, Noah and I shared the guest room. 2 twin beds pushed against opposite walls. He lay staring at the ceiling for a while, then whispered, She talked to you, didn't she? She did. What did she say? That she's still figuring it out. But she didn't slam the door. He smiled faintly. She loves hard, but slow. So do you. He rolled to face me. Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have been anywhere else. We didn't kiss that night, didn't cuddle or hold hands under the covers. But something passed between us anyway, something unspoken, permanent. The kind of quiet commitment that doesn't need candles or titles to feel real. Driving back from Noah's parents' house, the silence between us felt different. Not uncomfortable, not tense, just full, like we were both still processing everything that had just happened. But for the first time, we didn't feel the need to rush through it. The air outside was cold. Clouds hung low and heavy over the highway, and the playlist Noah queued up was mostly instrumental stuff. Soft piano, muted guitar, music that didn't try to tell us how to feel. Just let us feel it. He tapped the steering wheel gently with one hand, his other resting on the center console, close to mine but not touching. Every now and then I'd glance at him, and he'd glance back, both of us with faint smiles, like with a shared secret, even though we didn't need to whisper it anymore. I think she's coming around, I said after about 40 minutes. Noah nodded. Yeah. She didn't look at us weird when I leaned into you on the couch. She didn't even blink. She made sure there was enough pie for 2 helpings each. That made him chuckle. She does that when she's nervous. Bakes. It's a good sign. I waited a moment before asking, and your dad? That wiped the smile off his face just a little. He didn't say anything, but he didn't walk out, which is more than I expected. I reached over, this time closing the space, and rested my fingers on his hand. He flipped his palm and threaded them through mine. Neither of us said anything after that. We didn't need to. Back at the apartment, things felt different in a way I didn't have words for. Not because the space had changed, because we had. For the first time since this all started, I felt like we were finally seen, not just by each other, but by people who mattered. The next few weeks passed quietly. Soft routines, long mornings, movie nights where we didn't finish the movie because we got too caught up in talking about everything and nothing. Noah had started leaving little notes around the apartment. They weren't dramatic. Just him. Don't forget your umbrella. Dummy. Rain today. Your socks are in the dryer. Again. I saved them. Again. You look really good this morning. That's all. I started writing back. Scribbling on receipts, napkins, sticky notes I stuck to the bathroom mirror. Thanks for always saving my socks and me. You're not terrible at this boyfriend thing. Come to bed. That last one he framed and stuck on the fridge. We never really had the talk. The one where couples decide what they are, what label they're wearing, how to describe themselves to other people. We didn't need it. One morning, we bumped into our neighbor while walking out of the apartment. She waved and said, "You two are the cutest couple I've seen in this building in years." Noah just smiled and said, "Thank you," and that was that. But as December crept in, something I didn't expect started happening. I got scared. Not of him, not of us, but of how right everything felt. Because in my life, things that felt right didn't always stay. I started having weird dreams. Him leaving, disappearing, forgetting who I was. And during the day, I'd catch myself looking at him too long, afraid I'd blink and it would all vanish. He noticed, because of course he did. He always did. We were making dinner, chopping vegetables, something domestic and quiet, when he looked up and said, "Are you okay?" I hesitated. "Yeah." He tilted his head. Want to try that again with a less obvious lie. I set the knife down. I think I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. He leaned back against the counter. "Why?" "Because this feels good. Too good." So, things like this don't usually last in my world. He stepped forward then, slow and steady, and placed both hands on either side of the counter beside me. "Do you want this to last?" he asked. I nodded. "More than anything." "Then we fight for it." I looked up at him. His eyes weren't soft that time. They were steady, strong. "You're not a phase to me," he said. "You're not an experiment or a convenience or something I'll grow out of. You're the first thing that's made me feel whole in a long, long time." I swallowed hard. My heart thudded in my chest. "I'm scared," I whispered. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to mine. "Me too," he said. "But that doesn't mean we run." That night, I wrote a note I didn't leave anywhere. Just folded it, slid it into the back of my journal. It said, "I don't know where this is going, but for the first time, I want to stay for the whole ride." A week before Christmas, he surprised me with a weekend getaway. A cabin 2 hours outside the city, nothing fancy, just quiet. We lit a fire, made cocoa, laid on the floor in sleeping bags like teenagers, watching snow collect on the windows. He reached over at one point, ran his fingers down my arm, and whispered, "You know what I love most about this?" I turned to him. "What?" I'm not pretending, not filtering, not shrinking. I smiled. "Me either." And then I said something I've been holding on to. "I love you." He blinked, then said, without pause, "I was hoping you'd say it first. I've been carrying it around for weeks." We both laughed and kissed under the weight of it. And this time we didn't pull away. The first night I moved into that apartment, it was cold. I remember dragging my suitcase up the stairs, the hallway lights flickering, and thinking, God, I hope this doesn't suck. I didn't know anyone in the building. I didn't know the city that well. I definitely didn't know the guy I'd agreed to share a 2-bedroom apartment with, Noah, who showed up in cargo pants and a sarcastic smirk, tossing me a beer before I even finished unpacking. I couldn't have known, standing there in that tiny living room surrounded by cardboard boxes and stale air, that I was walking into the most important chapter of my life. Now, that same apartment feels like something else entirely. It smells like burnt coffee and is cologne. The walls have photos, ones we took on that cabin trip, blurry ones from our game nights, and a magnet-clip Polaroid of us in matching sweatshirts, both of us laughing too hard to keep our eyes open. The couch is still too small. The kitchen still doesn't get enough sunlight, and the heating still rattles when it kicks in at 3 a.m. But it's home, because he's here, because we're here. 3 weeks after the cabin trip, we hosted a small get-together, just close friends. Sam brought her new girlfriend. Josh showed up with a 6-pack and 2 different versions of the same dumb story we'd heard a dozen times before. Noah made lasagna from scratch. He burned the top layer, but no one cared. And at one point in the night, I caught him watching me from across the room, just looking like he was memorizing something ordinary but important. Later, when I asked him about it, he said, I was just thinking how lucky I got. And I believe him. We never had a big defining moment. No dramatic public kiss or teary-eyed confession in the rain. Instead, it was built like bricks in a wall, one by one, slow, solid, lasting. The way he'd tuck his feet under mine on the couch, the way I'd cook on the nights I knew he'd had a rough day, even though I hated cooking. The way we never went to bed angry, not because we never fought, but because we learned how to fight together, without breaking what we were building. He started using the word we more often. We need milk. We should call your sister back. We should plan something for our anniversary. Anniversary. That one threw me. You kept track of the day? I asked, surprised. He shrugged. Of course. I've never had a day worth remembering more. It's funny how love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it just appears. In the quiet, in the routines, in knowing exactly how someone takes their tea, or which drawer they always forget they put their charger in. And sometimes it surprises you even after it's already there. One morning, mid-January, I walked into the living room to find Noah sitting at the table, wearing glasses I hadn't seen before, hair messy from sleep, reading something with intense focus. He looked up, smiled, and said, "I love you," just like that, like it was the most natural sentence in the world. And it is. We're not perfect. Sometimes we misread each other. Sometimes he forgets to text back. Sometimes I get quiet when I should speak. But the difference now is we come back. Every time, even if it takes a minute, we come back. A few weeks ago, he asked if I wanted to renew the lease together. I teased him, said, "What, you're not sick of me yet?" He just smiled, looked down, and said, "I'm not looking for new." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't figuring it out. This was us. Real. Rooted. Right. So here we are. Two roommates who shared awkward mornings and takeout dinners and passive-aggressive sticky notes. Who grew into something neither of us expected, but both of us needed. We still leave the bedroom door open when we sleep, not because we're afraid of missing something, but because this space, this life, feels so full already. Why close any part of it off? Sometimes I wake up before him and just watch the rise and fall of his breath, the crease in his cheek from the pillow, the way his hand always ends up reaching toward my side of the bed, even when he's still asleep. And I think, this is what home feels like. If you told me a year ago that one awkward moment would lead to this, to a love that's quiet and goofy and fierce and safe, I would have laughed. But now I wouldn't trade that awkward moment for anything, because it turned into everything.